I never imagined that my life would take such an unexpected turn. It all started when I downloaded Tinder out of curiosity, just to see what this dating app thing was like. In the midst of casual conversations, I met someone who caught my attention, and before I knew it, we were sharing more than I imagined. The problem is that I was already married. My marriage, which was already frayed, became a pale shadow in front of the excitement and newness that this new relationship gave me. It was a mistake, I know, and I take full responsibility for my actions. As the relationship with the guy on Tinder developed, I made the difficult decision to end my marriage. The conversation with my husband was painful, but he deserved the truth. He didn't deserve to be deceived. However, things took an unexpected turn after the breakup. Driven by the anger and pain that my decision caused my ex-husband, I ended up making an even bigger mistake. I exposed our situation on the internet. I vented about my feelings, but left empathy aside. He became the target of jokes and teasing, especially in the workplace. Over time, I realized that my revenge only fueled a cycle of pain and resentment. Today, looking back, I see how much I could have handled the situation in a more mature and respectful way. I learned the hard way that revenge does not bring the healing we seek, it just perpetuates suffering. I can't change the past, but I hope my story serves as a reminder that, even in times of pain and betrayal, it is essential to act with compassion and respect for others' feelings. After my ex-husband was exposed on the internet, the situation became even more complicated. The words I wrote out of anger and frustration found a life of their own on social media, and the repercussions were beyond what I could have imagined. At first, I received messages of support from a few people who understood my pain, but it soon became apparent that most were more interested in fueling the sensationalism than in understanding the complexity of the situation. My ex-husband found himself surrounded by a sea of cruel comments and bad jokes, especially in the work environment. What was supposed to be an outburst turned into a public nightmare for him. The muffled laughter in the office corridors, the pitying looks and the whispered conversations at the adjacent tables became a constant in his daily life. He went from a respected colleague to a laughingstock, all because of an intimate situation that became a public spectacle. Meanwhile, I realized how harmful my impulsive attitude had been. The revenge I sought against a failed relationship was creating scars deeper than any betrayal. Regret was the word that echoed in my mind. I tried to repair the damage, but some wounds are difficult to heal. My ex-husband, despite everything, demonstrated incredible strength. He faced the jokes with dignity, focusing on his work and trying to maintain a professional demeanor despite the obvious embarrassment. As the days passed, the emotional toll of what I had unleashed weighed more and more on my conscience. Watching the suffering of my ex-husband, a man I once knew deeply, turned into a target of laughter and malicious comments, was an open wound in my soul. I decided to seek a conversation with him, in an attempt to minimize the damage caused by my thoughtless actions. We met in a cafe, a neutral place that neither recalled our old happy moments nor the recent chaos. When I saw him, I realized that the marks of those turbulent weeks were written on his face. Tired eyes, slumped shoulders, clear signs of a battle he didn't ask to fight. Initially, the conversation was tense, permeated by the resentment that I myself had harbored. However, as I opened up about my genuine regret and awareness of the harm done, his lines of defense began to give way. He, contrary to what I expected, did not respond angrily. His gaze reflected a mixture of sadness and resignation, as if he was accepting circumstances he could not control. In our subsequent conversations, I realized that his impact on his life was not limited to the work environment. He faced distrust from common friends, shame in front of his family, and the difficult task of rebuilding his social and emotional life. My thoughtless act reverberated throughout various spheres of his existence. As I tried to offer some comfort, it became clear that the words I had spoken online had created a chasm that was difficult to bridge. The trust relationship was broken, and my search for redemption was just the beginning of a long journey. As the days unfolded, the desire to repair the damage I caused gained more and more strength. I knew that apologizing was a crucial first step, not only in easing my own conscience, but also in trying to ease the suffering I had inadvertently inflicted on him. We scheduled a new meeting, this time in a calmer environment. I felt a lump in my throat as I approached, aware that my words might be too fragile given the magnitude of what had happened. However, a part of me still hesitated, fueled by the ego that was reluctant to fully admit my mistakes. As we sat down, the words stuck for a moment. I faced him, finding the courage to confess how sorry I was. However, an inner voice whispered, feeding my wounded pride. He wasn't perfect either. He also made mistakes, I thought, a desperate attempt to find justifications for my own pain. The silence between us grew, and I felt the weight of responsibility. Finally, I took a deep breath and began to speak. But instead of sincerely apologizing, my attempt at redemption was shrouded in caveats and justifications. I talked about the flaws in our marriage, as if that could explain or mitigate the devastating impact of my recent actions. As I spoke, I saw a look of resignation in his eyes. He listened, but there was not the expected reciprocity in the words I spoke. It was as if my ego was trying to control the narrative, protecting me from the vulnerability of fully admitting my mistake. At the end of the conversation, I realized that I had missed a valuable opportunity. Instead of seeking a sincere reconciliation, I fueled the pride that, in a way, had contributed to the entire situation. My ex-husband, after all, didn't just deserve a partial apology, he deserved respect and a true show of repentance. Upon leaving the place, a feeling of emptiness and frustration came over me. I understood that the ego could not be the guide on this path of forgiveness and redemption. There was still much to be done, and the next step would be an attitude to confront my own pride and selfishness. I learned, the hard way, that true humility is the first step to repairing the damage we have caused.
I was accused by my wife and my college friend of having an extramarital affair with the latter. The confusion began when my wife found messages between the two of us on my cell phone, messages that, to her, suggested something beyond an ordinary friendship. At first, I was perplexed and speechless, trying to understand how these messages could be misinterpreted. The situation worsened when my wife and my friend simultaneously confronted me, accusing me of cheating and breach of trust. Amidst the emotional chaos, I took a deep breath and decided to explain the truth. I claimed that the messages were part of an internal joke between us, something we had always done since college. However, I realized that this would not be enough to prove my innocence. Fortunately, I had an alibi that neither my wife nor my friend expected. The night the messages were exchanged, I was attending an event with co-workers. I called a colleague who was present at the time, and he confirmed my presence at the event during the same period in which the messages were sent. The look of surprise on my wife and friend's faces was palpable when I presented this unexpected piece of evidence. They hadn't considered the possibility that I was somewhere else at that particular time. The confusion began to slowly dissipate as reality set in over the unfounded accusations. The days following the revelation of the truth were filled with emotional turmoil that I could not control. Even though innocence was my ally, the baseless accusations cast a dark shadow over my heart. I felt hurt and deeply disappointed, not only with the situation itself, but with the breach of trust that I had always considered unshakable in my marriage. Confusion hung in the air, and even with the forgiveness expressed by my wife and my friend, the emotional wound seemed far from healing. The mere thought of being accused of cheating by those I love left me shaken in ways I could barely articulate. The nights became long, and the weight of distrust hung over me like a dark cloud. Reflection on the current state of my relationship began to consume my thoughts. I found myself questioning whether trust could ever be fully restored, whether the emotional scars would ever completely disappear. The idea of ending the relationship began to hover as an option, a painful escape, but it seemed to be the only way to regain some inner peace. I spoke in depth with her about my anguish and the depth of the emotional impact that those accusations had caused. I explained that although I loved her, the shaken confidence made it difficult to imagine a future where we could rebuild what had been lost. Tears flowed, words were exchanged, but the feeling of disconnection persisted. The thought of ending the relationship that was once the source of so much love and support is devastating, but the uncertainty of the path ahead is equally intimidating. The days that followed our frank conversation were marked by increasing emotional tension. My wife, upon realizing that the relationship was heading towards a precipice, began to resort to emotional manipulation strategies to prevent me from making the decision to end it. It was as if, instead of rebuilding, we were sinking deeper into the complexities of our feelings. Initially, she took a more subtle approach, trying to appeal to the nostalgia and happy memories we've shared over the years. She remembered moments of affection, joint achievements, and dreams that we built together. However, as she realized that I stood my ground on the need to assess the future realistically, her tactics began to intensify. Emotional blackmail has become a common tool in approaching her. She began to express intense anguish, claiming that my decision to consider breaking up was sending her into a state of deep despair. She begged me to reconsider, emphasizing the idea that our history, our family, and our lives were on the brink. The messages and calls were constant, full of tears and promises of change. She appealed to compassion, highlighting the suffering that separation could cause, not just to her, but to everyone around us. It was intense emotional pressure, and I found myself in a constant dilemma between concern for her well-being and the need to preserve my own inner peace. As the days pass, I find myself confused. The accusations, the confrontation, the attempts at reconciliation, and the emotional blackmail have left a trail of turmoil that obscures any clarity about what should really happen. Confusion now permeates not only my present circumstances, but also my understanding of the past and the future. I wonder if the foundations of our relationship were truly solid, if the seeds of mistrust were always there, waiting to sprout. This avalanche of emotions made me question to what extent the story we shared was built on solid foundations or brittle illusions. My mind oscillates between wanting to preserve what's left of the love and intimacy we once shared and understanding that, as painful as it may be, separation may be the only way to regain some emotional sanity. My wife's emotional manipulation threw me into a sea of uncertainty, where the lines between genuine love, concern, and possessiveness became blurred. As she continues to appeal to my emotions, I feel caught between loyalty to the past and the need to safeguard my own well-being. At this time, confusion prevails, and every step toward the future seems to be clouded by doubts and unanswered questions. The only certainty is that the journey ahead will be difficult, regardless of the decision I make. The challenge now is to find clarity in the midst of emotional chaos and discover the path that will lead to healing, whether through reconciliation or painful goodbyes.
I never thought that one day I would be here, venting about something so painful and absurd. It all started last week when my coworker, Anna, started acting strangely around me. At first, I thought it was just routine office stuff, but I soon realized that something was very wrong. On Thursday, I was caught off guard by a wave of rumors that began to circulate around the company. They said I was having an affair with our boss, Rodrigo. I was shocked and confused, not understanding where it was coming from. My mind began to fill with unanswered questions. In a casual meeting with some colleagues, I noticed that Anna was acting strangely. She gave me judgmental looks, and her insinuating comments left no doubt that she was the source of the rumors. But why? I could hardly believe that someone could make up such a cruel story. Things got worse when, on Friday afternoon, my husband, Andre, called me furious. He was angry like I had never felt before, and his words cut like sharp knives. He said he found out about the alleged betrayal through co-workers and that he wanted nothing more to do with me. I tried to explain, cry, beg him to listen to me, but Andre was unyielding. He believed Anna's lies without even giving me the chance to defend myself. My heart broke when I heard the final words of our conversation. He wanted a divorce. From that moment on, everything collapsed around me. Mutual friends looked at me suspiciously, and the work environment became unbearable. I felt alone, betrayed by a friend and abandoned by the man I loved. Today, I'm here, trying to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. I don't know how I'm going to get over this, but one thing is certain, trust has been irreparably broken. I just wanted people to know the truth, but it seems now the lie has become more powerful than any explanation I can offer. The days that followed were a blurred mix of sadness, anger, and confusion. At work, the atmosphere became even more hostile. Colleagues who were once friends started to avoid me, and judgmental looks seemed to follow me everywhere. Anna, in turn, wore a satisfied smile, as if she was savoring the destruction she had caused. I tried desperately to find my way into the gossip storm, but it seemed like the more I tried to explain myself, the more people believed the lies. I even confronted Anna, questioning why she invented that cruel story, but she just mocked, suggesting that the truth no longer mattered. The nights were the worst. Alone at home, I stared at the walls and tried to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. My marriage, which once seemed rock solid, was now just a shadow of its former self. I felt lost and grounded, and every thought took me back to the invented betrayal. I sought professional help, and therapy became my refuge. It was the only place where I could expose my wounds without fear of judgment. The therapist helped me process the pain and understand that the only way to move forward was to accept that some things were beyond my control. Over time, I realized that despite the pain, I needed to focus on rebuilding my life. The broken trust with Andre might never be repaired, but I couldn't allow Anna's lies to define my future. I decided to focus on my own truth, my integrity, even as the world around me continued to believe the distorted narrative.
My name is Lucas, and for a while, I was in 2 relationships. It sounds like one of those cliché stories you see in movies, but trust me, the reality can be just as complicated as any Hollywood romantic drama. I met Anna at college, and from the beginning, I knew there was something special between us. It was as if our souls understood each other on a deep level. But, as they say, the heart is treacherous, and while I was still involved with Anna, I met Julia at a party. The chemistry between us was instant, and I found myself torn between 2 incredible women. I kept both relationships a secret, deluding myself with the idea that I could manage this complicated situation. I convinced myself that I was keeping everything under control, that no one would suspect. However, one day, my house of cards began to crumble. The betrayal began with a fumble on Facebook. I was always careful not to leave a trace, but haste and overconfidence betrayed me. I ended up liking a photo of Julia while logged into Anna's profile. A silly mistake, but enough to trigger a chain reaction. It was a Sunday night when Anna confronted me. Her eyes were full of tears, and the lump in my throat only grew as she explained what she had discovered. The impact of the betrayal was evident in every word that came out of her mouth. My world started to fall apart, and the only thing I could do was apologize. The confrontation with Julia came soon after. She, in turn, expressed a mixture of anger and disappointment. I was trapped between 2 women who deserved far better than I could offer at the time. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the dust began to settle, but the scars remained. Anna and Julia moved on with their lives, while I faced the challenge of rediscovering myself and understanding the roots of my irresponsible behavior. Regret became a constant companion, a shadow that hung over me, reminding me of the wounds I had caused. Confronting my own inner demons was a painful but necessary process. I needed to understand why I chose to walk this path of deceit, how I got to the point of hurting such incredible people. Therapy became a refuge for me. It was there that I began to uncover the deep layers of my own self, facing the fears and insecurities that fueled my search for immediate gratification, even at the expense of others' feelings. As I worked to come to terms with myself, I decided to dedicate time to rebuilding the friendships that had frayed during this emotional storm. Many people close to me were hurt when they discovered the betrayal, and it was my responsibility to show that I could be trusted again. The sincere words of apology echoed in every difficult conversation I had, and humility became an ally on my journey of redemption. Some friendships were rekindled, while others remained marked by past mistakes. The forgiveness process, however, was more complex when it came to Anna and Julia. Time does not heal all wounds, and some wounds leave permanent scars. Even though we went our separate ways, I never stopped sincerely hoping that they both found the happiness they deserved. Today, looking back, I recognize that the choices I made were deeply selfish. However, this experience served as a turning point in my life. The pain of betrayal and the responsibility for my actions have shaped me in ways I never imagined. While I carry the painful memories of what I caused, I also carry the learning and determination to be someone better.